The foreword to the second edition was written in 1955. It had been 16 years. It just grew. The short stories, it grew by leaps and bounds. Just to give you an idea that it started little by little, twos and threes and fives were springing up in communities. This is group. By 1955, there were nearly 6,000 groups and over 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Notice they use the word recovered. People went to meetings to carry the message, to fellowship, to continue to work on step 10 and 11, which we'll talk about. They weren't there for 10 years, in and out of meetings, trying, struggling, white-knuckling it to get better. And then to use the term recovering, or I have recovery. No, they recovered. They recovered completely. We'll later talk about how recovered doesn't mean the same thing as a cure. What was clear is that they had followed the tenets of these Oxford groups, which was a para-church or spiritual organization that was not affiliated with any religion or any particular church or denomination. What they were is that these were groups of people that wanted help, and there were 4 basic things that they did. They had a total surrender to God. They had this acknowledgement that their lives were in shambles, that they were suffering, and that they themselves were the cause of their own suffering. And as they surrendered their lives to God, the God of their understanding, which Christians would call the Holy Spirit, this power, this grace came into their lives and gave them what they needed. For alcoholics, this meant continued sobriety, that they do these 4 processes, or later became 12 steps, and they were granted the grace to wipe away the addiction. It says in the page of XVI, this is Roman numeral 16, though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, so this was Bill, he was convinced that all for the need for a moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. So as you can see, if you're familiar somewhat with the steps, those are the steps, not necessarily in order. It showed that really all the steps were done all the time. It was not this drawn out process. Again, I hear of people talking about do 1 step a month, like January step 1, February step 2, March step 3, and so on. That will kill you. That is like a physician prescribing you medicine, maybe something you have in a bottle and you take only 1 pill a month, where it says take twice a day. Or if you have chemotherapy, most of us would drop everything to save our lives. So that's the nature of addiction. It causes us to procrastinate. It causes us to wait. In Christian terms, it says repent tomorrow. And that kind of thinking is very deadly. That's what causes us to die from this. It's not from lack of cure or lack of resource. It's just that it keeps getting put off and off. Probably people, our friends in Overeaters Anonymous, where when in their dieting days they say, I'll just start to watch what I eat the next day, or I'll start to exercise the next day, or so I could go on and on. It says that moral inventory, so we were looking for our defects of character. That's what kept us sick. Defects include pride, this inflated sense of self. Inverse pride is still pride. It's more like, I'm too bad to get better. I'm too bad to get sober. If I do something wrong, it's horrible, and we catastrophize. And that's just as much a problem as I have no problems. I'm shameless. I just have no shame about things. Everybody else has problems, but not me. The other things we struggled with was fear, that we found ourselves to be very sensitive people. Everything bothered us. That's why having alcohol in our lives made things tolerable. Many people think that alcohol is used to get high and to get a buzz, and that drugs are there for that. No, it may start off that way, but with the alcoholism, the ism part, it's I do this just to cope. And take it away is when I kind of fall apart. The restitution to others, this is when we harmed people, we made it right. Many of us were too ashamed to go back and try to make things right, but it's something we had to do. Notice 8 and 9, which is we made a list of all the people we had harmed and became willing to make direct amends to them all. Describes this willingness, this desire to do this, and we most of the time have that at the very beginning of our recovery. If we delay, we'll kind of forget about it and go back and create more problems and more victims in the wake of our addiction. But if we do it quickly, we will see that it's humbling. And God gives grace to the humble, but He's opposed to the proud. This is in the book of James in the Bible. In fact, a side note is the Alcoholics Anonymous group was so connected to the book of James, they might have even called themselves the James Club. But as Providence would have it, it's called Alcoholics Anonymous now, actually after the book. What they also did was a continual dependence on God, this reaching out continually throughout the day, asking for God's will and not their own to be done. This was done to connect with God through humility, watching for defects of character, of resentments, of fears, of inflated sense of self, so they'd humble themselves, they'd shrink themselves down. They would say, not my will be done, but your will be done. As a result, God's grace came to them and gave them all the power that they needed. What you'll find later as we talk in step 2 is that our dilemma, our biggest dilemma is lack of power. We kind of know what we need to do. We need to just stop drinking. We need to stop using drugs. We need to stop using cocaine. We need to pull the needle out of our arm and stop using heroin. We need to stop eating. We need to stop looking lustfully at people. We need to stop working. And there's probably more I haven't gotten. But why can't we stop? Well, the problem with addiction is it tricks us into thinking, I can stop. Just give me one more time. But it's been like 1,567 times that you stopped. I know, but this time I'm really going to stop. You could make an argument that sexaholics, alcoholics, overeaters don't have too weak a will. Yes, they're weak around their addiction, their behavioral choice. But really, you could argue that they are too strong-willed. This thing kicks us in the butt over and over and over. But this time it'll be different. And that's the delusion that keeps us sick. When we humbly open up our hands, as opposed to white-knuckling it, open up our hands and say, God, I am at the end of myself. I have no more good ideas. I am tired. I have no power, no more self-power. I give up. And this is where giving up is the best thing we can do. This goes against a lot of the messages we have heard. And not to put down all these messages from childhood, but, oh, you can do it. Believe in yourself. That's gasoline to the fire of addiction. Don't believe in yourself. Don't trust in yourself one bit to recover. Trust in God, the God of your understanding, and He will supply everything you need to get sober. there is a principle that we should talk about here in the foreword to the second edition, that it says that only an alcoholic can help another alcoholic. I tend to believe that to be true. I don't think that we actually have to have like a narcissistic, you have to have exactly my life before you can help me, because that would be ridiculous. That's just some of the ways we cut ourselves off from the solution. In fact, many of us will go to meetings and we'll look at these people and go, whoa, I'm not that sick. I'm ready to leave here because I'm well. If you do that, you may stay sicker longer. I would invite you to just consider, when you go to meetings, look how you can identify with the problem that other people are sharing rather than compare. There is something powerful when you see someone else who's recovered completely from an addiction that is killing you, that offers you hope, and it helps you put your faith in God that you won't get any other way. A professional who's not acquainted with addiction, or just anybody who's well-meaning, may just inadvertently say, try harder, I know you can do it. And those words are death to you. That you need someone who says, look, I'm not sure how I recovered. I can tell you though that I did. I did these steps, I did what I was told, and somehow something supernatural happened inside me. I mean, maybe I can point to a spiritual experience I've had, but often it's just I began to get sober, and I began to realize God was alive, and I began to realize I really depended upon Him for everything. Because yeah, I may get sober and stay sober for a while, but what keeps me sober? Well, it's every day I get up and I do morning prayers or my morning meditation, and I go through the day asking that God's power is with me, that I avoid all kinds of resentments, all kinds of opportunities for pride, opportunities for unforgiveness. I avoid trying to control the world. I avoid fears. I try to avoid any kind of dishonesty. If I do that, I will be successful. I don't like the word success, but I will be able to acquire sobriety today. Can I even do this in my own strength? No, I can only do it by God's strength, so I need Him for everything. See, prior to recovery, it was Erik's will, Erik's direction. I was directing my own life. I was willpowering my way through life. And I was Erik powered. It's like I had a strapped on the back of my back, a self-willed battery pack of how I'm going to do this. This book talks about many of us live by self-propulsion. Well, self-propulsion and self-reliance can only go so far. But today, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, I can say I'm better than I was only by God's grace. But I now have to go to this power continually. And if I began to, what we'll say that Christians would call fall from grace, meaning somehow detach yourself from grace through our arrogance, because pride is given, God's opposed to the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. So humility is key here. Humble, humble, humble. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking about yourself less. So if someone says to me, Erik, you really hurt my feelings, I feel really bad by what you did, a prideful and a self-obsessed Erik would be, oh my gosh, what did I do? I can't believe I did this. Notice the words, I can't believe I did this. It's just me, me, me. I may also go the other direction in pride and go, well, I don't know what their problem is. They should talk. And look, yeah, I'm not perfect, but neither are they. Well, that kind of defensiveness is not humble either. A humble person says, I am so sorry that I've hurt you. I'm willing to change. I'm willing to try better next time. I'm really sorry. And moves on. The person then is able to quickly focus on the damage done, not themselves. It says later in this, we'll talk about this, but selfishness, that is the root of our troubles. That we were driven by 100 forms of fear, self-seeking, self-delusion. And in that kind of state, we step on the toes of others. And then they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but invariably we had made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. And this is actually from the section dealing with step 4, which we'll talk about. In the foreword to the second edition, we see that as AA grew, that these 12 steps had helped so many people, that the organization, the membership was so big, that they went through growing pains. They called it an adolescent period. The result was the 12 traditions, and I'm not going to go into those in detail now. They're really important. It's what keeps the groups together. Without unity, we're all going to die. That this is not an I program, this is a we program. Notice that as I began reading the foreword to the first edition, it says we of Alcoholics Anonymous. So they don't really speak for themselves. But the 12 steps keeps me from killing myself. The 12 traditions keeps me from killing you. And this is really true. So when you enter programs, meetings, realize that you may be new and there may be things you didn't know. I've broken a number of traditions without knowing it. Once you know it, then you're going to be better understanding the principle. No one's going to come and give you a citation for breaking one of the commandments. They're really guidelines and principles. Hopefully they will come to you humbly. That's not to say everybody in 12-step meetings are well. Really important to say that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Does not take any particular medical point of view. Is not associated with any kind of religion, but associates themselves with other helping professionals, but not in any official way. They would just be considered friends of AA. Forward to the third edition. It says, the fellowship at its core remains simple and personal. Each day, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one alcoholic talks with another alcoholic, sharing experience, strength, and hope. That's how this message is carried, as one-to-one. It's not meant to be shared in a way that is preachy or proselytizing. It's one person just shares their experience of what happened to them, and by doing so they share their strength, and which gives us hope. It gives us all hope that it says that nothing so will ensure us against a further relapse or a slip as working with other alcoholics. So whatever 12-step group you're part of, really important to carry that message one day at a time. It says in your morning meditation, you should ask God what you could do for the person who still suffers. And I know we hear this all the time in meetings, but do we really ask God, how can I carry this message to those who suffer?